afternoon, campers. How the devil are you? Quick, short walk today. Start by the river near my flat, and just the normal 6 miler down the river and back along the canal. Not quite as nice today as it was yesterday. Quite overcast, a bit cloudy, the odd drop of rain, quite cold. Thankfully not much wind that will drop the temperature even more. Yesterday was again very cold, but a gloriously sunny day for most of the day, and I didn't record anything then because I was actually out with an old friend that I hadn't seen for quite a while. So after me being fairly miserable in previous videos about the pub, and it was good to see this guy again, and we went for a good 9-mile walk, in fact the one that I did a week previously, from Buxton to Whaley Bridge, and it was really good. Fantastic views. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. So that was really good. Nice to have a good catch up with him, and after me saying being feeling very downtrodden about the number of friends I had and all that kind of stuff, it was good to catch up. I'll talk about that another time probably. So I'm just coming down to the weir now, and as I was setting off, I was thinking, what can I talk about today? And it's interesting actually, because there's a subject that I haven't really properly touched on yet, and began to explore, and that it was triggered this morning by thinking about my dad, and the general way that he was. Obviously when someone dies, you're left with all sorts of different emotions and memories, and regrets and wishes, and all sorts of things that I've talked about before. But one of the key factors that has left me for a long time with a bitter taste in my mouth, perhaps, is the way that my dad behaved throughout his life, through my childhood, and then continued after I'd left home. So that's I'm going to touch on that today. And in talking about the subjects and the topics that I cover today, I want you to be aware that, yes, as I've mentioned before, it is kind of therapeutic for me to talk about all of these things and get them out of my head and try and put things into perspective. But most importantly, I really hope that by exploring these things, exploring the issues that I'm going to talk about, that I can help other people who have been or are still in the same situation. So there we go. I'm going to try and combine two topics again today. I thought that might be interesting, and I have given this some thought already. So forgive me for cheating a little bit. But as I mentioned before, the first topic that I'd like to address is my dad, and to begin just by giving some kind of overview of the kind of person that he was, and the things that now that he's passed, we having put our heads together, have kind of discussed what might have been the problem, and the second topic, which is kind of, well, you'll see how it's related, is some of the jobs that I've had and the experiences that I've had in my life, and how I'm going to tie them in to my dad's behaviour throughout his life. So that's the hope anyway. So where do I start? Well, one of the things that we've all kind of agreed upon and realised since my dad died is that he probably had something that's known as narcissistic personality disorder. Yeah, doctors have tried to come up with various ways of identifying someone who has this complaint. It's not even always been recognised as a complaint, or a condition, maybe is a better word. And I'm sure that quite a large portion of the population probably have heard of the word narcissist or narcissistic or narcissism, and some of you might realise that actually stems from I think it was Greek or Roman mythology, probably Greek, a guy called Narcissus, and you may remember the story if you don't remember his name. He was the guy that bent over to look into a pool of water, like a pond or something, a very still pool of water, and saw his own reflection in the pond and was engrossed by his own reflection. And we use the same term these days, narcissist, to talk about someone that's obsessed with themselves. But that's pretty much the limit of when we use that word in normal parlance. Just to talk about, he's a bit of a narcissist, you care too much about your looks, or you're always quaffing your hair in the mirror, or concerned, overly concerned probably is the term with how you look and possibly how you behave. But narcissistic personality disorder encompasses a whole lot more than that and delves deeper into the traits of somebody with that kind of issue, with their persona. And through kind of common agreement, me and my mum, brother and sister have almost post-death diagnosed that that's probably what my dad had, as well as physical complaints that he had as well. He had a palsy, a specific type of palsy that was very similar to Parkinson's. He had other physical medical problems, like not being able to swallow very well, having to have all of his food mashed up into a pulp before he could swallow it, and even then still not being able to do so sometimes. And the other main thing that was quite crucial really towards the end of his life was the fact that he couldn't communicate. It must have affected his throat in some way, because he just became a stutterer. He couldn't get his words out. He knew exactly what he wanted to say. He was, appeared at least on the surface to be very lucid, upstairs still, but really struggled to get the words out. And So having a conversation with him was nigh on impossible, because it would be like, it would take 5 minutes just to get a couple of words out or a sentence. And although we did try and encourage him to use his iPad and various other bits of technology that he had to try and type out his message, it was almost impossible. And sadly, that's one of the things that perhaps contributed to not a particularly rewarding end to his life. Not being able to speak, not being able to communicate what his wishes and wants and feelings, being locked up in I don't mean that in the prison sense, but almost he may have felt like he was being locked up in a nursing home, with all of those things going on, not being able to swallow, and he probably just gave up on life to some extent. Was also diagnosed with COVID, although I am slightly still suspicious of that. The powers that be do seem to be trying to get as many COVID statistics as they can on their lists, and whether he actually had the COVID virus at some point or not, who knows. He didn't have any symptoms, and my guess is that he was just another one of these nursing home statistics that they wanted to add to their books, so that they could say that it was really affecting the country more than it actually was or is, or whatever the terminology may be. Seems like it's dying down now, thank God, so let's hope things can go back to normal soon. Anyway, that's veering off the point a little bit. So the physical problems that he had, and after having died, we kind of decided that there was a much longer standing mental issue that he'd had probably for the majority of his life, certainly since we met him. So since my mum met him and married him, and then us kids came along, it must have existed since then, because the signs were there all the way from the beginning. So you can, extrapolating back, he probably had those things either since birth, or it was due to his environment when he was a kid, that sort of the bad programming, if you like, or whatever it was that caused it, started to bloody flies. God, bloody flies getting in my face. This is the problem with water walks. So yeah, that condition, narcissistic syndrome, personality disorder, was probably with him for a long time. You've got to go into the whole nature nurture debate. If some people might say that you're born with these things, and some people say that it's because of your environment as you grow up that these things are caused. Sometimes maybe it's a bit of both. Who knows? Just going to get past these noisy lorries. I'll come back to you in a second. So, before I continue with talking about my dad in particular, try and get you out of the sun. No, it's not possible. I wanted to mention, fairly near the beginning, that there are various tests that you can do. Is it psychiatrists or psychologists? I'm never sure. There are various tests that they've come up with, which is it doesn't give you an accurate diagnosis, but it's a start. It's just a start, and so I'll link some in the description below. There are a couple that I know where to find. There are several YouTube videos, but there's a wealth of information out there. How to cope with someone that's like it, what to do about it in different situations, how to leave someone if you're in a relationship with someone that's got it safely, and all sorts of myriad of other situations are talked about and discussed. And one of the main things that I got from that, even though my dad had died, he died January the 6th, even though he's gone, and my family have talked about it since, it has, again, that has been very therapeutic for me, but trying to pinpoint some of the reasons why he was like that. The milder versions of it, it could just be put down to that someone behaves very selfishly. You might take the mickey out of someone that just you're too concerned about how they look, and maybe that's just a mild version of it that we all have as human beings. It's our nature to care about how we look and how we come across, and there is a selfish element to all of us too, which is a good thing. It's a good trait, a good quality to have in certain circumstances, and in moderation. A degree of selfishness is good. It helps you to survive, and as long as it's mixed in with a whole range of other personality traits, then it makes for maybe more of a rounded person. But let's talk about my dad. So my dad, I'm going to list some of the things that happened during my childhood, which led us to believe that he had NPD. And he wasn't necessarily selfish, as in he wanted everything for himself, literally, like money or bar of chocolate, or all the literal physical things that we think of when someone's selfish. But he was very possessive, possessive of my mum and us kids, and of his life and his lifestyle, and very protective of it. Again, those are good qualities in small amounts. But when you take those to the extreme, then that's when problems start to occur. For example, when me and my brother were growing up, we were never allowed to make friends with other people. I've talked about this in another video, my friends video. Never allowed to go out, play on the street, never allowed to go out of school hours and mingle and mix and to make friends, to meet other people. We were completely discouraged from exiting the house, apart from school or family holidays or family outings, and it was absolutely frowned upon. Why? Well, you can only guess that my dad didn't want us to realise what it was like outside, that he wanted control of everything that happened in our family. He wanted us all to go to school or to go to work, and then to come home, and then he's back in control of everything again. He was completely reluctant, to the point of almost forceful imprisonment, to let us out of the house for any reason. That affected us, socialising then becomes a problem at school, and then later on in life, as I've talked about. But then, you take that to the extreme where any discovery that's made that you are doing anything outside of school is then punished. So the second thing, that as a result of his wanting complete control of everything that's going on within the family, means that if it's not maintained to his liking, then it was punished. And I would say it was a good mix. No, good is the wrong word, but it was a mixture of physical and mental torture. I couldn't wait to leave home. From the age of about, I don't know, I probably started suspecting that I didn't want to be there around the age of 6 or 7. And looking back now, you put the jigsaw pieces of the puzzle together. I hadn't heard of NPD before my dad died, or at least until very, very shortly just before he died and was in a nursing home. And we all started to think about it because obviously we realised that at some point in the probably near future he's going to die. And so you start putting all these the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, and talking to members of the family that you haven't really discussed this with before, and discovering things that you didn't know about, and it all starts to fall into place. So I'm not just waving at you, I'm batting flies out the way. It all starts falling into place. And then, I started researching it. I started looking into it. I wanted to know why. When my dad died, one of the first videos that I made, probably the day after or the day after that, I'm asking the camera. I'm asking him through the camera, if you like. Why was it like that? I think that was my phrase that I used. Dad, why was our childhood? Why did we have to grow up like that? It's just incredible, when you look back at the time when you're going through the torture, you all you can think about is escaping and getting out of it. And then once it's all over, and now literally all over, you start asking questions. Why? That's one of my biggest regrets, is not having the balls or the courage to ask him when he was alive, what was it all about? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you say this wasn't allowed? Why, when my brother was okay, I'm going to talk about family stuff now, and I will check with them before I release it that it's okay to do so. But if it's not, then I'll cut bits out. But really, when it comes down to it, I am all for being honest about stuff. So why, when my brother was doing badly at school, did my dad decide to beat him up and throw him down the stairs, and so that my brother had to have 6 weeks off school because he was covered in bruises, and my dad didn't want the teachers to see. If that sort of thing happened these days, my dad would be locked up. Why did he physically abuse me, my sister, my brother and my mum, all of us? We were always under the threat. You never knew when that physical violence was going to come, and it was coupled with so I'm talking about sort of grabbing a child's arm, or my mum's arm, so hard that you had bruises and pain for weeks afterwards, slapping across the face, using a very stiff finger to prod in the chest and other places of the body, pushing someone away violently so that they fall over, spitting in their face, shouting, putting their face right up to yours and shouting at the top of their voice with an angry, red, sweating face as spit comes out all over your face. That's the kind of thing we had to put up with. That's the physical abuse that we had to put up with. And the mental torture came, or I guess an element of the mental torture was knowing that could happen at any point, at any moment. Things could be fantastic one minute and completely turn the next. It was almost like Jekyll and Hyde. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that we had to put up with, the physical violence and the threat of the physical violence if things didn't go right, and the spasmodic sort of unpredictable threat of that violence, and when it was going to occur, when things were going to turn sour, never knowing how long Once you'd supposedly done something wrong, and were physically and or mentally punished for that, not knowing how long after that things were going to be sour. The relationship, the atmosphere in the house was going to be stifled and dull and miserable for everybody, because it affects everybody when you're cooped up in a box together, not knowing how long that was going to last after the event, and being forced to apologize, profusively, day after day, hour after hour, for what you'd done, and until he was satisfied that you'd apologized apologized to him enough, and inflated his ego back up again enough, for him to suddenly decide, and that could be just as quick. Suddenly it'd be like, all right, how you doing? Yeah, okay, yeah, la 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 la. The Jekyll and Hyde thing that I talked about. The atmosphere could a turn of a switch almost could completely change in the house once he'd decided that everybody should be forgiven for what they'd done. But that could be days. Certainly wasn't hours. Certainly nothing was ever resolved on the spot. Oh, you've done something bad, have you? Oh, you've apologised? Oh, come on. These things happen. Let's try to do it a bit better next time. That kind of thing. And mostly, I guess, because some of the things that caused the argument in the first place, we didn't think we'd actually done anything wrong at all. Picking on the smallest thing, almost like, and you'll see how this ties into what I'm going to talk about later, almost like the person, my dad in this case, was waiting for just one small chink in the armour of the dragon, and then firing his arrow into that, even though the rest of the dragon's scales were shiny and complete, just waiting for that one small chink, that one small comment or thing, and if that didn't happen, then making something up, and creating something out of nothing, for the argument to occur. It was almost as if my dad couldn't survive and get through his life without having that up and down. It was almost like he was addicted to that, or that he was programmed to that, and maybe some other people will realise this too, that the way that someone behaves is goes through a cycle like that, where that kind of thing happens. All right. Yeah, and I think I'll come back down. I'm retracing my steps after that little interruption, because I was halfway through videoing and going down my little under the tramway thing that I've done the last few times, and there was some shady characters. A car, scruffy looking car, and a shady looking guy with scruffy clothes on, and I caught a whiff of what I'm guessing was weed, although it could well have been mixed with something else, spice, or I don't know what spice smells like. So I decided that it would be better for my overall safety if I didn't go down that slightly more remote route today, and it's the weather isn't so bad, but there do seem to be a lot less people on the other side of the canal, so I'm going to go down there and try and maintain an intact body. See you in a second. I think probably, in all probability, the guy was just stopped his car to have a spliff and was just a little bit high and was trying to get into my video. Realised that I've got a camera on the end of a stick, and probably just wanted to be a cheesy dude and get into my video, make rude signs or something behind my head as I walked away. But you never know. This is the city centre. It's a remote tram underpass going through scrub wasteland. You don't want to take the chances, even during the day like it is now. I don't want to be discovered 3 months later in a bush. So, where was I? I don't know. I'll have to check. Yeah. So that's kind of a brief overview. Having just quickly scanned back over what I said just now, I mentioned the fact that it could be the argument was never for hours. It would always be for at least a certain number of days, and sometimes weeks. Weeks and weeks could go past, and no forgiveness would be given, despite copious bending over backwards to and pussyfooting around him all the time. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm really sorry about what I did. Even though the majority of the time we didn't actually feel sorry for anything. We didn't even know what we were meant to be sorry for. We had to go along with the pretense of the fact that we'd supposedly done something wrong and apologise for that thing that we'd supposedly done wrong. Absolutely ridiculous. So you can imagine. But I just wanted to clarify that because I think you may have been misled from my turn of phrase that it was forgiven after hours or immediately. When I said that, I meant that that's what normal people do. And I only know that from seeing it on telly and seeing friends and other people in my family and seeing it in everyday life. Normal people, most of the time, one of the persons does something wrong. One of the people does something wrong. I'm an English teacher, and the done thing, the good thing to do is try and clear the air as soon as possible, apologise as soon as possible if you think you've done wrong. If not, sort of try and negotiate and discuss it in a mature manner, and come to some agreement, even if it's agree to disagree. That's what most people do. I'm sorry I didn't pick you up from school. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't. I'm sorry I was late. Whatever the thing is. Yeah, thanks, trains. Thanks for rearranging your timetable so it's a fucking freight train going past when I want to fucking talk about stuff. Right, anyway. Most people apologise and are forgiven and it's all sorted. It's in human nature to want to try and resolve conflict as soon as possible. Surely it's in all of our, or most of our nature to try and resolve. We don't like conflict. A large portion of us don't like conflict and want to resolve things as quickly and efficiently and satisfying everybody in the equation as much and as quickly as possible. Surely, is that right? Do you agree with that? Because that's what I've seen, my experience of life is that people want to do that. But this was absolutely not the case. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was the fact that I said that it affected the whole family, and it absolutely does, not only because you're cooped up in the same box together, but because other people can then become involved in the argument. And I take my hat off to my mum for, there were occasions where she was obviously trying to defend us kids, all of us or individually, for what we'd done, and would then become tied up in the argument herself and would then become a problem. So you could have as an example, you could have a situation where one of us kids had done something supposedly wrong. We'd been physically or verbally or both punished for it. The horrible atmosphere then pervaded for days and days and weeks afterwards, despite numerous what's the word that I'm looking for? What is it when you do something, you're overly sort of nice to somebody, you're overly obsequious, that's it, I think that's the word, obsequiously apologising, obsequious behaviour from the person that did something wrong in trying to apologise and, you know, be forgiven for what they've done. And this could persist for a long length of time, and then possibly just before things were, you know, the next day we could all wake up and everything would be fine again, my mum would make a comment or say something or give a look. That's all it could take sometimes, was just give a look, and she'd be dragged in and it would start all over again. It would start all over again, and then the person that it started with may or may not be forgiven then, probably not. And you know, it was just, he thrived on it. He thrived on that terrible atmosphere, and basically it's about being in control. There may be several other factors involved in it as well, you know, like the cycle thing that I talked about. Maybe it's a hormone thing, or some kind of mental cycle that goes through your brain. I don't know, I'm not a doctor of psychology, so I can't answer these questions. I'd be very keen to know, you know, if anybody does have any answers to any of this or suggestions, that I'd be pleased to know, because it would help me along the path to understanding it all. So, oh my God, honestly, here's me walking around my local area, moaning about the methods of transport that take me out to further afield. Ah well, such is life. So that's the kind of thing that would happen. What was I talking about? Come on, you're meant to remind me. Fuck do I know? Scrambled eggs, that's right, I was talking about scrambled eggs. I really love scrambled eggs, by the way, or any types of eggs. In fact, I must buy some eggs on the way home, because tonight's meal is going to be homemade pasta and whatever the brown mush is that I got out of the freezer that I can't remember putting in there. So that's tonight's meal. I think it's either lamb or beef, but I'm not sure. It's browny red colour, and we'll just have to find out. Yeah, so I'll let you know. Wish me luck. But the pasta will be nice nonetheless, with a bit of nice cheese grated on top. Yeah, that's good. I'm looking forward to that. But I'm going to stop for lunch in a minute. Yeah, I haven't passed my lunch stops place yet, my little bridge. And I'm looking forward to some cold pork belly strips that I cooked last night. Not so nice cold, obviously, but I am looking forward to that. Nice cup of tea in my flask. In the meantime, I'll try and remember what I was talking about. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that would happen on a regular basis, a cyclical basis, and as a result, me and my siblings and my mum lived in total fear of when that would happen, and it was almost like a prison sentence. I mentioned before that it was like, I realised from the age of possibly 5 or 6, maybe a bit earlier, that's the way things were going to be, and noticed this subconsciously, of course. It's only now that I'm talking about it and thinking about it that I've come to all of these sort of surmised in so many different ways, but that was the way things were going to be, and that then from a slightly older age, certainly 9, 10, 11, that I realised that I couldn't wait to escape from that, and wondered whether I ever would escape from that. You start realising, as you go to senior school, perhaps you realise that there is the structure that's going to happen in your life it's going to be senior school, and that's going to end at 16, and that we were totally encouraged is the wrong word, forced to believe that schooling should continue after that, and that therefore sixth form college would probably be on the cards, and that would be an extra 2 years, and that then you'd be considered an adult, and that things might change, and you might get the opportunity to leave home and go about your life your own way. And it's interesting because if I look back through family photos from, as I do, because on my computer, as most people have on their computer, some kind of function that enables you to, when the computer has gone to sleep for a certain amount of seconds or minutes, it then sort of, you can set it so that it flips between photos or pictures on your hard drive, as it's sort of the screensaver, basically. I suppose that's the phrase I'm looking for. The screensaver then flips between photos, hundreds of which are family photos, and looking back through the times, the ages, my ages as I was a kid growing up, you can start to see the look of disdain and desperation and agony on my face. Not just mine, my brother and sister and mum too, the strained fake smiles and the disdainful, moroseful, if that's a word, no it's probably not, look on our faces. A family that was trapped, a family that couldn't escape, couldn't see a way out, and that's one of the regrets that I've had, is that none of us, me, my mum and my brother and sister, none of us had the gall, the courage to do something about it. If my dad was violent toward me, I should have, if he pushed me, I should have smacked him in the face maybe, and said, "What do you think you're playing at? Why do you think you're talking to my mum like that? What do you think you're doing, assaulting my brother like that, or assaulting me like that, making these decisions, these stupid, baseless requests from us." And I think you could say about all of us that all of us couldn't wait for it to be over. Thankfully it now is, and my mum is obviously only just now starting to come to terms with all of that, because I left home when I was 18 for a year and a half, I think it was, and then went back briefly before I realised that I just couldn't stay there. And similarly with my brother, when he then a few years later left home, and my sister 10 years later when she eventually left home and got married and everything else. And my mum is only just since his death starting to come to terms with all of that, that we've me and my siblings have had ample years and decades to start to try and figure out and come to terms with in our heads, and maybe never will, maybe never will completely eradicate everything that happened from our thoughts and minds, because it was like a prison sentence. You hear on the news of, not very often thankfully, but families that kids and stuff that have been trapped, kept in a cellar and kept away from society for years and decades, and how terribly it affects their lives, and how they then have to try and adjust to normal society, and the struggles that they have with that, coming to terms with how relationships, healthy relationships are meant to be, how healthy parent-child relationships are meant to be, how to interact with society in general, becomes it's traumatic trying to relearn or learn to start with all of that stuff. So yeah, that's what happened, and it was like a prison sentence that thankfully is now over for all of us, and that's just one element of the way that things were, and some kind of background, I guess, I'm trying to give you into the realization that we've now all come to, that my dad had some kind of psychological problem. He was totally wanted to be in control of everything in his life. He wanted all the praise and adoration to be directed towards him. He wanted all the things that the achievements that his kids and wife made throughout their lives were all because of him, and that extended into all elements of his existence. Fanatical about being organised and keeping a diary every day, and fanatical about keeping his finances crossed and dotted to the T, or whatever the phrase is, keeping detailed analysis of every single penny that was spent, that element of control, and feeling like a fish out of water when he wasn't in control, was a theme that was current throughout all of his life, and it affected us badly, and it was terrible. I could go into so many details about how things actually were on a day-to-day basis, and that extended out into years of horrible existence. What a cheerful topic, eh? But this all stems from narcissism, Everything is about you. It was all about him. It was all about him and what he did and what he achieved, and keeping it all within a little bubble, that was his control over his life and everybody's life around him. Not wanting to socialise with other people. My dad, shut up. Shag each other and get it over with. Maybe I should call this channel Loud Transport and Shagging Canada Geese or something stupid like that. He wanted to keep control of everything within his life, and that's a trait of being narcissistic, because you want everything in within your grasp to act and behave as you do. All you have to do really is to save me the trouble of waffling on about it, is to just go and Google narcissistic syndrome or narcissistic personality disorder, and there's loads of videos and advice and help out there for people that are affected by it, and it will help you to notice the signs, hopefully early warning signs of somebody that's like it, and some of the things that you can do about it to try and eradicate it from your life. Of course, there were several other aspects in which my dad's narcissism affected his life as well, and I'm just going to reel off a few other things that have crossed my mind as I was sat there having a cup of tea at the Locks, and this was, he was found it very difficult to make friends, and probably didn't have any friends. He didn't really have any friends. There were a couple of people that he on and off had friendship with during his life, but they were very few and far between, and it didn't seem to last for any length of time. You could, of course, you compare that to me. That's similar to me, and I've talked about that in another video, how I've got to the age of 50 and still don't really have any friends of my own, close friends that have been close friends for a long time, but my dad certainly didn't. He found it very difficult, I think, to forge friendships, deep, meaningful friendships with anybody in his life, not even his wife, certainly not with his kids. I remember when my dad died recently, and my mum asked me that, is it a humanistic funeral? When you don't believe in any particular religion, and so you can have a humanistic funeral where you just have a guy that stands up, or a woman that stands up at the front and says nice words and talks about things, about the person's life and their kids and what they achieved and did during their life. And my mum was asked by that guy, in this case, to ask each member of the close family if they wanted to have anything that he wanted to say for him to mention during the funeral service itself. And so she asked me, my brother and my sister a few things that she put in herself. Also asked my brother's kids, 2 kids, if they had anything to add, even though one of them at least is quite young, and but everybody came up with something eventually. But I think, me personally, and I think it maybe goes for the others too, found it very difficult. When the question is, what are your lasting memories of the person, or what particular moments during your life or during your relationship with that person will you look most fondly back on after they've gone? Then I found it very difficult to come up with anything. I almost had to invent something And the thing that in the end that I came up with was that I remember at a very early age going on country walks and finding acorns and insects and birds and various things in nature or flowers, and saying, Dad, what's that? What's this? And so I must have been like 3-4 years old at that point, and those were the kind of questions that I was asking. That's the only sort of cherishable moment that I could think of to mention. And the fact that he would then, go on to explain, this is an acorn, or this is like the fruit of an oak tree, or whatever, asking the curious child's mind, asking their parent, what's this, and where's that come from, and why is this colour, and all that kind of stuff. But who knows? Even maybe my memory of that is actually, it was my mum that I was asking those questions to. I can't remember. I certainly remember that it wasn't very long, after my 5th birthday, say, that I started to. Now we've got pigeons shagging each other. Wasn't very long after that kind of age that I started to realise that I really didn't have a relationship with my dad, and that persisted all the way up to his death. I don't feel like I had not even a hint of a friendly relationship with my dad. Certainly couldn't turn to him and ask him questions about stuff and ask him advice, and turn to him when I was sad or lonely or confused, or he wasn't there for me as what I imagine a father is to most people. So yeah, he struggled to make friends. Really didn't do anything about that either. At least I've got hobbies and activities and things that I get out and do. Walking with my mate yesterday in the hills, going to the pub and being involved in the family that the pub used to be, and getting out and about and doing things and being involved in life and in society. And he didn't do that. He was never the kind of guy that would say, right, I'm off to the pub with my mates, or just going to go and meet Richard for a quick pint, or he totally cocooned himself in his house, and even when he was a junior school teacher, kids between 5 or 6 and 11, that kind of age. He actually did try he tried to get a job in a senior school at one point during his career, and didn't last very long at all. I think it was months, if that, because he just couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle dealing with young adults, that had their own opinions about stuff and would call him out on stuff. So he, for all of his life, ended up teaching junior school kids who are malleable and impressionable and controllable to some certain extent, a lot more than people as they become adults, and would go to school and in his classroom that would be another little cocoon, another place where he was safe and could get away with whatever he wanted to get away with. So yeah, didn't really make friends or make any effort to get out and make friends, and the odd occasional person throughout his life that he did form some kind of attachment to didn't seem to last very long, or drifted. Just didn't seem able to do that. And even close people that were close, or members of the family, after having visited them, and I've discovered this from my mum a lot more since as well. After having visited, a family visit, for example, or something like that, or a Christmas day, or just a birthday, or something, going off to sort of spend the day or a couple of days with somebody else, that was supposed to be part of the close-knit sort of family or friends group, would then go back to my mum and moan about that person and complain about them and say, and pick apart everything that he'd disagreed with while he was there. Put him in a social situation like a wedding or a funeral or any kind of situation in between, and he was just inept at talking to people and making small talk, or talking about anything deeper than that, And yet there was another side to his personality, which again is another trait of somebody who has NPD, where it's almost like the Jekyll and Hyde thing that I mentioned earlier, where he was, that's beautiful looking down the canal there, look. And just hi mate, looking down there into town, the sun catching the light of the water as it shimmers. So yeah, it's always funny when people wave and say hello, or just stick two fingers up behind your head. So the other side, the Jekyll and Hyde side, if you like, to the other side of his personality was when he wanted to be, when he thought it was, when he thought it would benefit him to do it, he was charismatic and full of life and jovial and jokey. So we could have had an argument, for example, for a few weeks. There could have been a terrible atmosphere in the house, and we'd go and, I don't know, spend the day with an auntie or something like that, and suddenly the coin would flip, and he would be turn into this smiley, and it was so obvious to me, at least, and I think to my brother and mum, that it was just all fake. It was all fake just to serve a purpose. It was fake charisma in order to serve a purpose. Again, I'm looking back in hindsight now. It's easier to try and work all that out from in hindsight. But I did feel it at the time as well. That's the way it was going, and it was all to sort of give the impression that everything was hunky-dory, that he was a lovely chap. I think I may have mentioned before at some point in another video that the carers, some of the carers that used to come around to my mum and dad's house before he died, before he went to a nursing home, some of those carers thought my dad was a lovely chap. Oh, isn't he a lovely, sweet old man that sits there smiling and sort of making the occasional cheesy joke, and it was all fake, all just totally fake. Putting on a show, putting on a show for the people, and people like we used to call him Uncle Mick, but he's not really an uncle. He was just a friend of the family. People like my Uncle Mick. Just a second. It's very noisy under here with the water cascading through the lock and the delicate aroma of piss under the tunnel. People like Mick, who was a friend of the family, were totally oblivious. Mick was probably the the guy that knew the most, that had the what would stand for the a friend, the closest thing that my dad had to a friend throughout his life. I don't understand it, but yeah, I don't understand why. But even Mick didn't see through any of the charade, the facade of my dad's, of the charisma thing that I've just been talking about. You know, he presumed, like hundreds of other people, that me and my brother were such well-behaved kids and always smiling, and my mum was always smiling, and we were doing well at school, and played the clarinet in an orchestra, and they presumed that what they saw on the surface of things in a social environment was exactly what was happening at home. And it wasn't. It was the complete opposite. It was all a charade. And if we were visiting family or friends, and me and my brother and mum, because that's before my sister came along, if we were to ever sort of reveal or show any signs of the fact that things weren't as they should be at home, then of course that would cause another argument. That would then lead to a disagreement again as to what was going on. So yeah, a very deep, detailed, convoluted. It's difficult trying to analyze it all and put it into a quick video. There's so many aspects to it. Talks about the way that my dad was, the way he was with other people, the way things were at home. It was terrible. It really was terrible. But thank God, or whoever is up there, or whatever is up there, if there is anything up there, thank the heavens, shall we say, that we've all three of us, me and my siblings and my mum, turned out reasonably okay and sane. And thanks very much that we've all turned out okay, and come through it all, and are able to look at things in retrospect and try and come to terms with it all and put the pieces together of the puzzle, and haven't turned out to be such bad people after all. In some ways of looking at it, you might think, well, my dad had a chip on his shoulder about life, that he had an axe to grind with all of humanity and all of its systems, and in some respects you'd be right. That did seem to be kind of the way that he looked at life, with a bitterness. I don't know where it came from, but a bitterness that things that the rest of the world couldn't be as he wanted. After doing his best to try and mould and control and have a tyranny, a regime with his family home, his family unit, then was really pissed off with the world that the rest of the world didn't conform to his way of thinking and his way of doing things and his thoughts. So you could say that a big part of it was that he felt like the world owed him something, and that's certainly the way he behaved, was as though the whole world revolved around him and the world owed him something, and should all behave like he wanted to, and then he'd be happy. But of course he wouldn't ever be happy. You could do behave like the perfect person, as I've insinuated. Behave like the perfect person, try your best not to do anything wrong, and still would be criticised. Something would be found, some small thing would be found that could to pin on you that you'd done or said or behaved in a certain manner that was wrong and wasn't how he wanted things to be. And I can remember, one of the phrases that he used to say was, when, say for example, me and my brother had done something wrong, you're taking the piss out of me. Those exact words. You're trying to make a fool out of me. Trying to make me look stupid. It was all about him. It wasn't about us or the thing that we'd done wrong. It was about how we'd affronted him, affronted his, his. I can't think of the word, but it was all about him. All about him. And it's weird, right? Because having mentioned everything that I've talked about so far, and I'm sure there's other things that will come into my mind and I'll talk about later, there's quite a large proportion of society that seems to behave like that. And maybe it's just me, but I seem to notice it more and more. I'm very astute to it. Maybe because I grew up and had decades of living under that sort of tyranny, that regime, that way of thinking, that maybe it's because of that I'm now more astute to it and pick up on other people that are behaving like that. And it's a sad fact that lots of people who there's lots of people in society that make their way to the top by being like that, by being that controlling, charismatic on the surface but deep down very twisted person. You've only got to look at some of the, but perhaps you could look at your manager at work or the owner of a large business or corporation, and or somebody famous maybe. Keep your eyes open and look at how people behave. Maybe there are certain traits of NSD, Narcissistic Personality Disorder, NPD. Maybe there's some certain traits of that help people with that to get through society and become managers and tyrants at the top of businesses and stuff. And I would say that it was heavily weighted in that respect. Everybody's had a good manager or good supervisor in somewhere where they live, but I think you could all of you probably can think of one person at least in your life that just completely tramples over everyone below them in order to get to the top, and yet in meetings and or on TV, for example, in interviews, they will the cheesy, jovial, cheesy, jovial, kind of charismatic part of them will shine through and carry them forward. We all probably know people like that, and it's a shame, but it's a hard fact about society. And society, in other respects, is also filled with people that have a chip on their shoulder. I've noticed people with chips on their shoulders at every stage of my life, and maybe it's a generational thing, maybe that one of the sad truths is that people who have childhoods that aren't so great, maybe some people then carry that the chip on the shoulder develops from that, and they feel like they owe society one, they want to get their own back on society, I don't think I'm like that. I think hopefully I've gone the opposite way. I've realised what a terrible impact my childhood had on me and my family, and I've done my best in as many respects as possible to try and reverse that and put that right in my life. And I think you have two choices when that's what when you've ended up having a bad childhood through one reason or another, and then you have two choices. Do you then just do exactly the same as your parent or parents did, or guardian, or do you change things and let it teach you a lesson about how not to behave in society? And hopefully I've made the right choice, but some people don't. So maybe it comes from your childhood. Maybe there's other external factors as well in people's lives that make that create the chip, so to speak, and they could be manifold. But we do seem to have a society these days that's full of people that think that they are owed something by the world, or hate society so much that they feel like they've got to get their own back for whatever reason, and some of the jobs that I've done and the people that I've met certainly fit into that category. And I've especially noticed it in public sector, if that's the right phrase, public sector, the public sector industry. People that serve the public, or should be serving the public in some respect. I'm ashamed to admit it in some ways, but I was actually a traffic warden for 4 or 5 years, and I was desperate for a job at the time, and I just took anything on, and I didn't realise, but at the time, who I would end up working for, but that's what I did. The Manchester City Council contracted out the parking enforcement in Manchester City Centre and Greater Manchester to a private limited company, so I began doing that job on the first few years, walking on the street, giving out the tickets, and then eventually progressed and got trained to be on a bike, doing it in the whole of Greater Manchester, and then after that I even got trained on the HIAB crane. I got the crane license, so that I was able to drive the truck that actually removes the cars that are parked illegally from the street and takes them back to the car pound, where the unfortunate customer has to then come back and pay loads of money to get it back. So I did that for several years. Not really proud of the fact that I did it, because it kind of went against my personality, really, to stand and argue with someone, to the extent that most of the time I would get up, go to work, get on my bike, for example, and shoot off as early as I could and put tickets on cars that were parked illegally before people even got out of bed, so that I could avoid that confrontation and please my bosses with the number of tickets that I'd got, but also I was avoiding coming face to face with angry members of the public who didn't think they ought to have been given a ticket. certainly when it came to the actual rules and regulations, I would abide completely by those, because otherwise it all comes back onto you. So as far as the Road Traffic Act and parking regulations go, I was always above board with that. Of course, the parking enforcement used to be done by traffic wardens, who used to be a subsidiary of the police, but then local councils and authorities were given that job to do themselves and contracted it out to private companies. So there's a whole great big load of stories there, but that's just, I wanted to mention that today, because I did do it, and through doing that job I actually noticed just how many people with chips on their shoulders there were that were employed by that company. In fact, I would probably say the majority of the people that worked there felt like society owed them something, and carried that anger and that frustration through into their job, and welcomed confrontation with the public. Absolutely looked forward to it every day, buzzed off it.